Now let's listen to a word of inspiration from Dr. Dick Hardell, a pastor, educator, writer, creator of wellness resources, and past executive director and currently senior fellow of the Youth and Family Institute, and my mentor.
I'm pleased that the ELCA Board of Pensions asked me to share some insights on a journey of renewal that y'all are on. When I was a very young boy, growing up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, our family went to church all the time. I mean, we never missed a service. My dad worked in the factories all of his life, and we went to early service, and we went to Sunday school, and we went to late service. We went to every midweek service, whether it was an evening. We always went, and we stayed there forever. And I even got 6 innings of a baseball game in while my parents were still talking to people after worship. And finally, one time I got so frustrated with it, I asked my dad, I said, "Dad, do we have to do this all the time? I mean, do we have to go to church all the time?" And this German dad looked at me and just said, "For the rest of your life." For the rest of my life, I thought. Well, that's a long time. I was thinking in terms of chronis. But years later, I learned that my dad knew something about theology. And he understood Sabbath as Jesus understood it, taught it, and modeled it. That Sabbath was for the rest of our life. I was thinking in terms of time. And my father was teaching me, though, it was for the rest of my life. A journey of renewal is learning how to live life well for the rest of your life. Years later in the ministry, I was at St. John Lutheran Church in Winter Park, Florida, and we had a congregation who began to think about what would it look like if a congregation got involved in helping people live well in Christ, that it may be well with you and you may live long on the earth. That would change how we lived and what we did and how we modeled and how we thought. So we gathered all kinds of people of the community of Orlando. We got people from University of Central Florida, and we got people outside the congregation, some people who were in illness-based ministries and others who were wellness educators and creative thinkers, and I was part of this process. So we went for our first meeting, and there were probably about 20 people gathered in this room, and I go into the room, and one of these brilliant PhD people from University of Central Florida says, "Pastor Hardell, what are you doing here? This is a wellness meeting." And I said, "I know. I'm one of the pastors here, and I've been working on the theology of wellness for a number of years, and I'm so excited about this ministry." And he said, "But you're not credible." I kind of chuckled, and he said, "I know you. Have you ever worked less than 70 hours in a week?" He said, "You're not credible. You can't be in this meeting." I sat down anyways because I thought, he's kidding. And then I realized, no, he was serious. As he looked at me, he said, "No, you can't be in this meeting." I walked out of the meeting and closed the door. Not being credible haunted me. His accusation was correct. I was not credible. I could preach it and teach it. I could do everything about it, but I wasn't modeling it. I wasn't living it. I wasn't living it in my own family, in my own home, as well as the congregation or the community. Wellness is a way of life for the rest of life. And I didn't understand how important Sabbath was, resting in the grace of God. In the same congregation, several years later, I was really concerned about one of the staff members of our congregation. She was such a gift to our congregation and to the whole church. An incredible facilitator and creative thinker. I was afraid she was going to burn out and we would lose this marvelous gift of God. And I really cared for her. So I looked at her and I said, "Pam, come with me." And I took her to the chapel. And inside the chapel, and she was kind of wondering, what's Dick doing now? And I said, "Take a look around here and look at the cross. Tell me about that cross that's here." And she said, "It's a resurrection cross." And I said, "Well, and resurrection cross means what?" And she said, well, it's empty. And I went, aha! It's empty, and it's supposed to stay that way. Only Christ's death on the cross and resurrection saves people and gives life. Why do you keep trying to climb up on it, Pam? Your sacrifice is just a tragic loss of a gift of God. Now, I'd like to say, well, that's where the story ended, and I did a wonderful job teaching, but the learning goes on. And about 10 days later, Pam came into my office, and she said, Pastor Dick, you come with me. And she grabs my hand, pulls me out of my chair, and she takes me into the chapel. And she points at the cross, and she says, now, Pastor Dick, what kind of cross is that? And I began to think of what she was getting at. And I said, it's a resurrection cross. And she said, and? I said, and it's empty. And she said, well, why do you keep trying to climb up on it? And again, I wasn't credible. I got the point. We as pastors, as spiritual leaders of the congregation, get so trapped into trying to cognitively understand and explain Sabbath without practicing it or modeling it for the rest of our lives. It kind of reminds me of the conclusion of Ephesians, where St. Paul vividly says we must put on the whole armor of God and describes all these things. And yet we seem to think we can take on Satan in our underwear because we might be good with a sword. Sabbath is essential on a journey of renewal for the rest of our lives. And I hope that you learn more quickly than I did that Sabbath is God's gift for you to model and to practice so that when you preach and teach, you're credible for the rest of your lives. Christ makes life exciting. Live it well.